Okay, let's move to some public policy areas that are hot this year in Tallahassee. It seems like educational issues are always hot, but at the top of the list, I think, is testing. There are so many people that think that parents and teachers and others who say there's too much testing. And there's a debate about when to test, how to test, who controls it, et cetera. Let's just start. You got legislation, I think it's Senate Bill 616, which deals with testing. What is your thinking? Let's start with your thinking about testing.
Well, first of all, this has become a big debate, not just here in Florida, but all over the country, because tests do matter. I mean, as long as you have education and you have schools, you're going to have tests. The question is how much tests, how many tests should we have, when should we test, and what should those tests count for? And what we've seen is an overload. There's no question about it. We have an overload of testing on our students where testing is driving the education versus education being the actual purpose and instructional stuff, and testing comes to measure that instruction. What we're trying to do this year is to have fewer and better tests. Fewer and better tests in order to actually measure the instruction that's going on in the classroom versus testing driving the instruction. I'm optimistic this year. The House has moved forward legislation. We're moving forward legislation. I think we're going to come to a good point where we have balance.
One part of the debate has to do with, what is the test and what should the test be, and the whole idea of where the test comes from is also an issue, even in the presidential election. Because the idea of Common Core testing, whether it's a correct interpretation of it or not, is that for some people, Common Core equals the federal government imposing testing on the states. Clarify that for our viewers.
Sure. In Florida, we do not have a Common Core test. We have a Florida Standards Assessment. Now, what we do have in Florida is we've had a high benchmark of standards here in Florida. And I will say, at a national level, I think the national debate of increasing our standards is a very good debate. But standards need to be driven at the local level, at the state level. But when we drive those standards at the state level, we have to be sure that we're not deceiving ourselves, that just because we're doing great and we have high achievement based on our own standards, that those standards should be benchmarked. We should look at those and say, well, how are we comparing to our other states? How are we comparing to internationally? I want to make sure that we're not that old adage, the lake woebegone, where everyone is above average and everyone is great. And so this debate nationally is a good debate. But here in Florida, we have our standards are set at the state level. Our curriculum is set at the local level. And it's a healthy debate to have, but we need to keep increasing those standards because, quite frankly, our students aren't competing anymore with our friends in Georgia or our friends in Alabama. They're competing internationally, and we have to make sure that we're measuring up.